Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and today I am delighted to be standing in for Kevin Graham alongside John Hughes and Paddy Sinnott. How are you, boys?
All good. How are you?
Very well, Paul John. Very well. I'd rather be in Kevin's shoes out on holiday.
Sunnier climes, John. Sunnier climes. He's got a habit of doing that. You know, that's what obviously attributes his pallor, where we're all sitting here looking like ghosts. But loads happening for your first appearance of 2023. And obviously it is rumbling on from the big game at the weekend. We were just saying before we came on there, Paddy, John and I, that I like to watch the game a second time if we're going to be talking and divulging and getting stuck in about it. And it's unbelievable how it looks different second time around, Paddy.
Yeah.
You know?
No, I mean, I've not had the opportunity to watch it the second time. I think the first time for me was enough. But it was a strange game, wasn't it? It was one of the games where you thought after maybe the first 25, 30 minutes we were going to steamroller it. And then it just seemed to turn on its head. We were in control. There was no threat at all. A lot of people commenting saying that maybe the Joe Hart mistake gave them heart. I don't think it was that at all. I think it was the substitution, the enforced substitution that turned the course of the game for us on that day. With Greg Taylor going off injured, I felt the balance of the team was affected by that. But I'm sure we'll touch on that later on.
Yeah, for sure. I think it is interesting to watch it back to see where the momentum swing occurred, John, because do you agree with Paddy? We were in control. It looked as though we were going to win this at a canter.
Well, as I said just before we came on, I watched it back in full this morning and I've had to readjust a couple of things that I thought at the time. But that's what Guinness will do for you. A couple of things I thought at the time, I thought the Hart incident was a big momentum changer, and I'm watching it back, it didn't really, they got momentum for about a minute to 2 minutes, and then we got it back and they got it back again, and they were the stronger side going into the half. But very much, as Paddy said, it was definitely JJ coming on, because it wasn't long before they realised he was having an absolute mare. So, it was a Weston. So he was having a terrible time, and they realised that and started targeting him. And plus, again, going into the second half, I mean, they scored within about a minute and a half. So if you're talking about momentum, are we saying that momentum now also carries over, during half time? Because that's not usually the case. So they've come out stronger as well. And obviously there are elements of that goal, again, JJ and, Anthony Johnson, stuff like that, which we'll come on to talk about. But it was a fascinating old game. So it was. In retrospect, at the time, not so much. My throat's still a wee bit sore. So there was a lot of shouting being done.
Those pints of Guinness looked fine, though, John. I'll tell you what, I bet it was worth it, mate. I bet it was worth it. No, there's a wee point I would make on the Joe Hart thing, because I've seen a lot of that chat on the socials, and there is a moment, right, where Joe Hart, he's got plenty of time on the ball. We know that. Ball goes back to him. But he looks up at Carter Vickers, right? And if you watch it back, Carter Vickers makes a kind of motion with his head as if to say, right, it's going there. It's going to the right back. And that's almost what Carter Vickers does, right? And I'm loath to criticise him because he was brilliant. I'm also loath to criticise Johnson because I thought it was a brilliant debut. But when you look to the space that Carter Vickers is asking Joe to put the ball in, Johnson's not there at that moment in time. Then he kind of hesitates, he puts himself under pressure, and that's obviously what then results in him having to make a great save. However, Johnson is absolutely bolting back to try and cover that bit of space that Carter Vickers is saying. So the guy's playing his first game. I think all of these little elements added up to that wee hesitation that Joe Hart made. But going back to what you said, John. Going back to what you said, John. Juranovic loses the ball 3 times in that 5-minute spell. Within the moment of Joe Hart losing possession here, Juranovic loses possession 3 times in that 5 minutes. So I think that is a key moment of the game. And we're going to be talking about Taylor and everything else that's happened, and the fact he's now on a T-shirt, which was pretty quickly done by one of the companies out there. The fact that there was a missile thrown at him or in the direction of him in the physio, and the bigger issue that's going to be creating as well. We're going to go through all the talking points. We're going to be bringing in all the chat from the regulars and anybody new coming onto the channel, because we just this morning have hit 20,300 subscribers on the YouTube. So thank you all for getting involved, subscribing and hitting the like button, because it does help us. Paddy Lavery, you're back as always. Afternoon, and afternoon to yourself, the underwater cabbage salesman. Yet to see a better name on YouTube. Afternoon, comrades. And Jungle Lion coming in. At the start of VAR, every Celtic handball was a penalty. Then suddenly every handball against Celtic and them wasn't. What changed? We'll kick off with the headline, the tagline. It's been reported this morning that Celtic will be having meetings with the SFA in relation to the implementation and handling of VAR. I've called it farcical. I've looked at the decisions again this morning and I'm at a loss. Let's talk about the two big shouts at the weekend. I'll start with yourself, Paddy. Starfelt, and we'll come back to his performance because I've seen him getting a lot of stick, and I don't think it had a bad game. But Starfelt goes in to block an apparent cross. Yeah. His foot is stood on, and the Rangers player hits the deck. This is the way I'm observing it, right? The player hits the deck and then celebrates, gives it all the fist punches and everything because he knows that he's won the penalty. At that point...
Conned the ref, you mean?
At that point, a Rangers player goes up to the ref and is asking for Starfelt to be booked. I don't know if you noticed that.
Nonsense. Absolute nonsense. Yeah.
And he's kind of waved away. Right. Now, at the time, on the day, Sean reckoned it was a penalty. I've seen loads of Celtic fans saying it's a penalty. Paddy, give me your take on it.
Never a penalty. For me, I said it at the time when I watched it, it's never a penalty. I mean, it's got to constitute a foul, doesn't it? To get a foul, you have to make contact with a player. Starfelt doesn't make contact with Sakala. It's Sakala that makes contact with Starfelt. So if that had happened in the middle of the park, would a foul have been given then? Or anything like it? I doubt it. For me, never a penalty in its life. And I know there's been chat about a lot of focus is a penalty all day long. He shouldn't have made the sliding challenge. But the point of the defender is to defend his goal, and that's what Starfelt did. And at not any point or occasion did he make contact with Sakala, and that's why Sakala celebrated like he did at the end, pretending that he was injured, pretending that Starfelt would make contact, doing the like you say, the fist pump. The video that I seen this morning was just blatant. I mean, I've got no issue with any player celebrating winning a penalty, absolutely none at all. But please don't do it when you're pretending to be hurt or pretending to have been hatcheted in the penalty box. It's embarrassing. So for me, no, never a penalty. I called it at the time. Not for me.
Not a penalty, says Paddy. Now, John, like yourself, when I'm watching a game, I'm completely emotionally involved in that game. And that's why I like to watch it back with a kind of like free head and a fresh pair of eyes and all these things. And I'm watching it back today and I'm agreeing with Paddy. Now, I know, right, this is the thing. I can't say there's a bias in relation to referees if I'm not going to sit here and say there's a bias in relation to me and Celtic. I'm a Celtic fan. Of course there is, right? And I'm trying to be as balanced as I possibly can. But I don't see a foul. I really don't see a foul. I think the Rangers players landed on Starfelt. What's your take on it, John?
Well, first of all, Starfelt's entitled to slide around like Bambi on ice if he sees fit, as long as he doesn't clatter into anyone. So it might be rash and it might be silly and he shouldn't have dived in, all the rest of it. But, you know, that's no issue with the referee or the laws of the game. You know, he can slide around like that all day. He can Tom Daly as much as he wants, swim around the park. You know, it's completely irrelevant. He didn't touch the boy. Now, so whose fault is it then, if that's the case, if we're agreed that that's the case? So essentially, I thought at the time it was a penalty, right? On first look. Mm-hmm. So when it happened, you think penalty. As soon as you saw it back, you think, oh, that's not a penalty. Yeah. Well, he stood on him. He never touched him. You know, because obviously in real time it looks like he's touched him. So you can't blame the ref for that. I don't blame the ref for that because, you know, again, I thought the same thing. But as soon as you see it back, which is the point of VAR? That's the point of it.
Yeah.
It's so that they have access to all the things that we're seeing in the pub, wherever you're watching it. It's so the fact that it wasn't called on VAR, or it's deemed. I mean, I don't know. The problem is when you slide in like that, you've got a situation now where you can't even the majority of Celtic fans can't agree on it. Most of my Twitter is full of people arguing about it. So if you're going to give them that opportunity to make a decision, then, you have to question whether it was the right thing to do to slide in, which it wasn't, but he didn't touch him. He was sliding past him. Your man stood on him. So are we getting, are there fouls going to be given against us every time one of their players accidentally stands on us? All over the park. Is that the standard we're setting now? Because that's what happened. It was an accident. He accidentally stood on him as he slid past. He never touched him.
No.
So he didn't foul him. So in my view, no. But, I already know in the comments, which I never look at while we're doing this, just in case the people in the live chat are offended. I'm wondering why I just never look at them. But, it's enough on my Twitter feed, certainly, to have sparked everyone off arguing. Mm-hmm. So, again, I don't blame the referee, but the VAR, will he call him? Obviously, he may have been, I don't know, maybe he was in the middle of shining his brogues or something, but, it was a ridiculous, it was a ridiculous decision, But, look, the other thing about it is as well, he'll be able to defend it, though. You give him enough there where he can possibly defend it. So they think they're on solid ground there, given that. And I disagree, heartily disagree. But, again, but I mean, before we, if we're not talking specifically about the refs, again, that was Juranovic again. Mm-hmm. At that point, I don't know how many times. My notebook is just full from this morning of JJ CCV, JJ CCV, JJ CCV, and that's honestly one of the worst performances I think I've ever seen in a Celtic shirt. And you could argue that the manager should have hooked him at half time. He was that bad, or certainly taken off. But subbing a sub who's supposed to be worth 15 to 20 million for us maybe isn't the best possible look. But I mean, he was to say
that was never going to happen.
Yeah, no, but I mean, he was that bad. He was that bad.
He was,
to the point that they were deliberately targeting him for nearly the entire second half.
It's absurd when you consider that we're given a debut to Alistair Johnson, yet it's Juranovic, the World Cup bronze medal winner, who has been linked with all these clubs all over Europe, that has a stinker, and absolutely, he was so poor. I want to look at maybe the reasons for that, but before we get on to Juranovic, I'm going to stand up for Starfelt here, Paddy, because 100%. Again, I love the diversity of opinions, both in our own comment section, but also on the social media. You can throw something out there. Let's have a debate, let's have a discussion, and let's, like John says, let's change your view, because my view's changed having watched the game again. And I've seen quite a lot of criticism for Carl Starfelt's performance.
Yep.
Now, I also know that this is something that Alan Morrison has probably taught me over a period of time. Most of us watch the game and remember the flashpoints. I get that, totally get it. And only when you go back and you kind of observe the entire 90 minutes, do you actually look at it, or I certainly did. And I thought Starfelt, there was 2 occasions where he's lost possession in the entire game and he's given away a penalty, which we've just discussed. I don't think he had a bad game, Paddy.
No, he mopped up everything. What we did on Monday was we negated their threat down the wings, and all they were resorting to was long balls through the middle, and Starfelt and Carter Vickers were mopping them up all day long. Starfelt is a victim of his debut last season, and it feels daft saying that, but his debut last season against Hearts is where this narrative started, and it started in the media. The media started powering this guy from day one, and people might say that I'm a paranoid Celtic fan, but the premise of what I currently do on Vital Celtic is I listen to every single person's opinion, every single journalist, every single I try to listen to every single podcast, unfortunately enough hours in the day, but I think I've got quite a good handle, a good grip of how people see Starfelt, and there does seem to be this narrative that he's a bomb scare. And I don't get it. I genuinely don't get it. He was part of the best defence last season. Mm-hmm. He's part of the best defence this season. We actually missed him when he was out injured. We conceded more goals when he was out injured. His performance on Monday, for me, I thought it wasn't flawless, but it certainly wasn't it's certainly no deserving of the criticism he seems to be getting from fans and social media. I thought the guy did great.
Yeah, I agree with that. And John, I think back to the game last season when Carter Vickers scores the winner at Ibrox, and him and Starfelt, for me, that was the best performance as a partnership. I thought they were brilliant. They've been getting criticised leading up to that about, bizarrely, even though we had the best defence in the league, about those, that partnership being a bit dodgy because Starfelt's playing on the left and it's
Absolute
an unnatural
nonsense.
side.
Yep.
And you see them performing at Ibrox last season and they were absolutely superb. And again, it wasn't flawless on Monday, John, but I think it's a bit unfair on Starfelt.
Well, I commented during the game, and I was interested to see watching back whether I was right at the time, but certainly during the first half, I commented that he was having an unbelievable game. I thought he was an absolute rocket at the back. They couldn't get anything past us in the air.
Yep.
He was winning everything. And I thought he was doing tremendously well. And what I said about him previously is he's got a mistake in him. But it depends whether that mistake costs you anything. Now, I've revised that slightly to say, because I was having a good, long, hard look at it today to say, look, when did it start? What happened here exactly? And I think, very simply, when he makes a mistake, he gets flustered. And he can stay flustered for a good 10, 15 minutes. And I think that's essentially what you're saying. But outside of that, he was solid as a rock. And I thought that we did definitely earlier on in the season. There was no question of that. As highlighted by the fact that everyone was going on about, are we keeping Jens and what we doing and how good is Jens and is he better than Starfelt? And as soon as Starfelt was injury-free, he was back in the team. So Ange has absolutely no doubts at all who's the better player. I thought he was really, for large parts of the game yesterday, I thought he was excellent. And yes, he can look slightly ungainly. He's not as classy as CCV, but he can look slightly ungainly because he's playing on that wrong side. But generally speaking, his distribution was excellent, apart from one occasion I can think of where he was a bit too hard out to the sideline. But that's one occasion in the whole game, and he shouldn't have slid in. That was rash. But, if your man had checked back as he had anticipated, then there wouldn't have been any issue at all. So he got that one slightly wrong. But for the most part, in terms of mopping up and the strength of the central defence, I thought he was really very, very good. So I don't know. I didn't see much criticism of him outside of the penalty issue. But certainly outside of that one issue, for me, I thought he was very good.
Yeah, and you're right about some of the discussions around Maurice Jens earlier on this season, and that's a player who has kind of like faded from the first team. He wasn't on the bench again at the weekend. Kobayashi comes in. I'm really keen to get some of your thoughts in. Do you agree or disagree with Paddy, John and I? Personal Jesus, VAR, do we start? About time Celtic approached the SFA. That is what we're going to be talking about after we speak about the Goldson penalty incident. Mikko Virtanen, good afternoon to you as well. And Keith Oakton tuning in, as always, from Plymouth. Hail, hail to you. Jungle Lion, here we go. Lobble can redeem himself and go after these VAR balloons. Now, we do know that Peter Lobble was back in the building. We were talking about him not getting involved in football matters in relation to recruitment. More than happy for him to get involved in this matter if it indeed resolves it. But we'll talk about Goldson first, right? Now, Paddy, did you get the IFAB Q&A memo yesterday?
Listen, this whole... Mate, I could go on about this nonsense. This is the problem I've got with it is this. Right? When VAR first came in, everything was getting given for handball. I mean, everything. And it wasn't just against our club. It's happened to other clubs as well, apart from one. And then all of a sudden, after World Cup, it changes. And what changed? Well, nobody knows because nobody's telling us anything. How come all of a sudden handball is now not handball? Unless, like you say, you get this wee meme from Twitter that's telling you to read the rules when half these people who have read this meme don't even know the rules themselves. Do you know what I mean? So, the lack of communication from the SFA regarding this whole thing is what probably drives Celtic fans up the wall. The lack of communication of why some of the handballs we were getting against us drives me crazy, and now the lack of communication we're getting about why they're now not handball only fuels it. So I'm glad that Celtic are looking to question the SFA. Whether it'll do any good or not, I don't know. They're notoriously unhelpful when it comes to matters of clarity as the SFA, aren't they? And they've been like that for a number of years now, so I don't expect that to change anytime soon.
Well, the word paranoia or paranoid is used time and time
I didn't want to
again.
use that, because that's been creeping into a few people's narratives the last couple of days, and
It has.
I didn't want to go there.
No, but the good thing is, though, Paddy, right? Tom Campbell, who is a fantastic author, superb author, in my mind, the best author in Celtic history in terms of his writing ability. He's unbelievable. And he wrote a fantastic book. And I would implore anybody out there to track it down. It's called Celtic's Paranoia, All in the Mind by Tom Campbell. And it's about time he'd done an extra chapter in it. But the way that he writes, John, it's very, very balanced. He doesn't go throughout the entire book and say it's all against us, it's all against us. He really does strip it right down. And when we're talking about the Goldson challenge and this IFAB Q&A quote that's doing the rounds saying that, if it's a reflex to kind of protect your face, his hands are up before Starfelt actually strikes the ball. It's the clearest handball that I've seen. It's a penalty all day long, if you ask me.
Well, I mean, from a scouting perspective, at least we, have a solid potential replacement for Joe Hart. It was it was a fantastic save. Really dominated his area. Came out with both hands. Lovely wee deflection over the top. But if you look at those IFAB rules, he meets all those criteria in that incident, all of them. Right. So the hands are up. He has saved that. Now, if you'd asked me before all this VAR stuff started, before, this year where, as you say, everything was being given as a penalty. If you'd asked me before this year, I'd have said, no, it's not a penalty. His hands are in. But that rule has changed over the last few years, and it is getting more and more ridiculous. And certainly the number of incidents we've had against us this year, but yet, the other team hasn't had, the number of incidents that we've had against us this year is genuinely shocking. I mean, I still can't believe the Bernabeu one. That still has me going nuts, every time I see it. Yeah. Looking the wrong way. He's upheading the ball. It's just, as I said at the time, unless you're doing nothing except signing Irish dancers and kangaroos, you've got no chance of not given against you. It's madness. But as you say, Paddy, it's the clear change that there's been. Obviously been a clear change. Yeah. There's obviously been a directive for a meeting or someone sat down and said, look, lads, just because it hits your hand, it's not a penalty. But we're not aware of that. They haven't made us aware of that. So all we are seeing is all these ones that were given against us in the early part of the season and all these ones we're not getting now. So, as you say, Paul John, paranoia. But the only thing that can dispel paranoia is clarity. Yep. And transparency. Yeah. And if you're not going to be transparent, people will become paranoid. In any walk of life, because that's what happens. It looks like you're hiding things. Decisions have been made. Changes have taken place. You're none the wiser as to what's going on. So are you going to get paranoid about it? Damn straight. Yeah, absolutely. And that was a clear penalty under, never mind the VAR from this season and all the rest of it. But I mean, that was a clear penalty. I mean, he's saving the ball from his face. You're not allowed to do that, so essentially, you've just got to take it on the chin, literally.
Exactly.
So it's unfortunate, but that really does, and that gets everyone very frustrated and exasperated, and it takes away from the game and what we're trying to do. But that was an absolute clear penalty, and if you turn those two things on their head. Even give us that one. Never mind the other one they got. Give us that one because that was absolutely clear as day. And that game's completely turned. And we walk away from there, with a win. We walk away from there potentially with a win, and the league's over. The league is over. The karaoke has started for the larger lady in the corner. So that's all done. It's all wrapped up. So it's potentially not just stealing the points, you're stealing a league. What happens now if they start making a comeback or we drop points and then it gets a bit nervy and a bit tight or whatever? These things can happen.
Big time.
But for me, that was it. That was the end. The league's all over. We get that penalty, we go on and win it, as far as I'm concerned. So it's very easy to get paranoid when people will not explain themselves.
You're right, though, about the momentum shift. We've been talking about it in the first half hour. That would have been monumental. As I say, people were pinning their hopes and on this IFAB Q&A, but when you look at it, right, it talks about the player's natural reflex movement. So if your natural reflex movement is to put your hands in front of your face, your natural aerial movement to try and header a ball would inevitably result in your arms being aloft like Bernabe, yet the penalty's given. I think that what's happened is they've watched the World Cup and realised we weren't doing it right. And now they're saying, right, that's how you do it. All right, okay, let's re-implement it. So that's really interesting. But in relation to that book, I would recommend it. And I'm going to say to Tom, because we are still in touch, get an updated version with a new chapter. Let's hear Tom's take on Celtic paranoia. Is it all in the mind? Celtic are going to be speaking to the SFA in relation to this. Gary Oliver, Celtic are 100% right to raise the VAR issue, but they should also raise the fan safety issue, and we will definitely be talking about that, Gary. We had Declan McConville on yesterday. He was one of the 708 fans in the stadium, and he spoke off air and on air about how bad it has become for that tiny minority Celtic fans in the stadium. Paul, I mean, what it's going to result in as well, Parry, is somebody is seriously going to get damaged. I mean, the photographs we've seen, they weren't that far away from Declan, where it looks as though it's a glass bottle that's ricocheted off somebody's head. I mean, we're talking skull fractures here. But now, by the way, I don't imagine anybody would be taking their kid to that game. But it definitely means you wouldn't, because the safety issues have been exacerbated by the situation with the tickets.
I mean, I think we spoke about it a couple of weeks ago, when I first came on the show, and I said at the time that if we're not going to get the full allocation of the full stand, we should just say no altogether, because how can you guarantee anybody's safety in that corner, that stadium? You're surrounded from above, from the side, even from below. I said at the time, hats off to these fans that want to go to that and want to suffer that for 90 minutes. Well, in fact, it was longer than 90 minutes because they had to be there, an hour and a half before the game kicked off. So they were there literally for 3 hours, 4 hours almost. I don't care what anybody says. Nobody can guarantee fan safety where Celtic fans are positioned in that stadium. And it's done for one reason only, it's for intimidation. And it's to make the fans feel intimidated so they don't make any noise. I just think it's time Celtic said, no more tickets. No more tickets until we either get the full allocation back or we don't want anything at all. That's it, done. And I don't care what people say about it's the biggest derby in the world and you'll take away for the occasion. That's all very well and good, but so will somebody losing their life or losing an eye. So for me, it's got to stop.
John, over to yourself on that one, because the branding of the game is something that the authorities rely on in terms of broadcasting and sponsorship. I'm more on Paddy's boat here. I'm saying I'm interested in the safety of the fans.
Well, we had a good conversation about this just before we went on the holidays, and just to repeat myself, that is not going to an away game. That's an expeditionary force behind enemy lines.
Yep.
And you need to be suitably prepared for potentially serious injury there. And I know people are going and saying, I don't care, I love it. But again, both clubs have a duty of care. And you must be able to provide the security. Now, in those circumstances, and as you pointed out, Paddy, and as everyone already knows, in that wee corner, they're above you, they're both sides of you, they are not being searched. I mean, the last thing we saw after the Joe Hart incident, do you remember the pictures of the bottles? Just rows and rows and rows and rows of bottles.
Scandalous.
At the very least, you need to have the people at the sides of you and the people above you subject to much, much more stringent security checks. Everybody going through there needs to be patted down, right? So if they're not prepared to do that, then that means they can't guarantee safety. And clearly they can't. I wouldn't want to be going there because I never mind the bottles, the fluids that could be thrown on you and everything else that could be flung on you. And I know a lot of the boys, as I say, I said the last time, I don't want to take it away from them. And you want people to have an experience, but I don't know what kind of experience that is. I don't know. Is that the kind of experience you want? You don't want people going to a football game as if they're going to war. You don't want the sort of mentality. okay, get the, wee beanie hat on, maybe get a wee steel hat underneath it, get, plastic goggles on just to be, it's mad. Someone's going to get really, really hurt. And as we pointed out before the last time, Paul John, it's the governing body that have responsibility for this. The way that you ensure safety for those people is to give them a proper allocation. Mm-hmm. Give them an allocation of the stand that we had before. If you can't do that, then don't give the allocation because you can't keep it right. And if you can't keep it right, then you have failed completely as a governing body, because that is the biggest game. And that is the one that the TV rights are all sold on. So if you're saying that we cannot guarantee fan safety, I don't know, and what, maybe in a couple of stadiums in Brazil or Argentina, you could say the same thing. But I don't know in what area in Europe, there's teams saying we can't guarantee fan safety, which you clearly can't by, corralling them into a reservation at the side. It's an absolute nonsense. And the SFA, apart from the whole VAR mishandling, this is another area in which they've completely failed. You have to put the foot down. You have to tell both clubs, I'm not saying that Celtic have not done nothing but respond. They've got no choice, really. But both clubs need to be told, at this game, there needs to be X amount of allocation for the away fans. End of story. That's it. You don't have any discussion on it. If you don't implement that, there'll be penalties, right? There'll be points deductions. As simple as that, because it should not be down to one club to hold the entire game to ransom, or hold the potential television deal to ransom, hold fan safety to ransom, right? Hold fan enjoyability to ransom. It's down to one club that's doing that, and it's unacceptable.
No, you're absolutely right. We're going to be returning to these days whereby you used to have to wear a hard hat to the football. And I remember, big shout out to Jamie Fox, who allowed me to photograph this. It didn't make the book, but it was one of my favourite items that I came across doing my research, where you would get a hard hat and you would decorate it and take it to the football to protect yourself. Like John was saying, you're going to battle. It's ridiculous. Are we going to go back to the 1970s on this? It's about time action was taken. So hopefully these talks will result in some improvements, both in VAR and also not just the safety. Yeah, go ahead, John.
Just say, Paul John, they won't. Because, and again, it's because whenever there has been major changes made, I was talking to, I think it was Phil McGillivan I was talking to the other day, and you're talking about how whenever changes have been made in terms of, like the Farry incident with Guidetti, that was an outside force. So that was wee Fergus coming in from North America. They're all very litigious, and see he was going to sue the arse off of people, and so things got moved along quick, sharp. Hugh Dallas, I mean, that was Phil himself that broke that story, from Donegal. It's always taken, Alex Thompson in terms of the other side of the city. It's always taken an outside force. There are too many cosy relationships, and people saying Lowell can redeem himself when he comes back. Peter Lowell's a man among, more than any other that's got cosy relationships on that side. You don't get, those European jobs that you don't get them by undermining your own regulatory authority. That's not how you get the big jobs in Europe. So Pierre Lowell is the most unlikely person to call these out. Now, have a discussion about what that means. Are we going to get any clarity on that? Are Celtic going to send a very strongly worded letter? We are outraged to see, whatever it is, what's the response going to be? Unless we can see some sort of application of Celtic's influence and an outcome from that influence, which is acceptable in terms of a response, then, it's just paper talk. It's paper talk to keep the fans quiet. It doesn't mean anything.
We do need to see an outcome, and I'm thankful that you brought up Fergus McCann, because the amount of battles he had, John, and as you say, outside influence, well up on his litigation, and he was fearless. He was absolutely fearless.
He never lost any either. No,
that's the thing.
Yeah.
I mean, remember the John Collins deal, Paddy, where he even pushed for that, for a transfer fee, because tremendous. Now, when I look at the safety of our fans, which is absolutely paramount. John, you mentioned a couple of things earlier on in relation to Joe Hart's goalmouth having the glass bottle in it. Celtic staff member with his head split. Greg Taylor and the physio were also pelted with missiles, and that's something that's been reported to Police Scotland. So it's the whole environment, and if Celtic are going into that cauldron and it's not safe, something definitely needs to be done. But I want to talk about Greg Taylor. I think you're right. The substitution of Taylor was huge in relation to the momentum swing, but also Juranovic coming in. I thought at the time, Paddy, and I'll ask you your honest opinion on this. I thought when he made that substitution, when he's got a natural left back on the bench, I did find it quite strange. Rewatching Celtic TV, for example, McCulloch and Boyd are talking about Juranovic not being 100% fit. Now, they've obviously got more of an inside track on these things. They're talking about Juranovic not being 100% fit, yet he's introduced to the action and he's played out of position. What was the big man's thinking there?
Your guess is as good as mine, and Ange, we trust, we're not supposed to question the manager's decisions because he more often than not gets them right. To my mind, Ange has made 2 mistakes since he became Celtic manager. Both mistakes have been at Ibrox. The first one was when he played Edward instead of Kyogo up in front, the first Ibrox game last year. And then the second one was putting JJ on yesterday, on Monday, instead of Burnaby. You could clearly see within the first 2 or 3 minutes that Juranovic wasn't at the races on Monday. And surely Ange must have seen that in training. Surely he must have seen that in his preparation. But then still decided to go with him instead of Burnaby, which leads me to think, well, what's Burnaby done wrong to not warrant coming on as a natural left back? So no, I thought it was a strange one. I especially think it's a strange one is when you consider the amount of speculation surrounding his future. That must play in his mind. I don't care what anybody says. If you're getting touted to the kind of clubs he's getting touted to, or reportedly being touted to, he's got to be thinking about that instead of subconsciously, instead of preparing himself for the game. I thought it was a strange one at the time. I was sitting watching it with my dad and my brother, and I thought, I think he's got this one wrong here. And unfortunately, it was proven to be true because he struggled every minute he was on that park, every minute.
But he's going to, you can sort of understand it, right? So obviously, JJ is a more experienced player. Obviously, when he's played there before at points, he looked like the best left back at the club as well as the best right back at the club. Obviously, he's far more experienced. So, that's all grand. You can understand that. What I can't understand is he dropped Johnson into his debut at Ibrox, the most difficult possible place, because obviously he wasn't happy with how Juranovic was playing or how he was prepared or how fit he was. He wasn't happy with something. Otherwise, Johnson wouldn't have been in there, because that's a hell of an ask to start a guy in his debut in that position and leave an experienced World Cup third place player, on the bench. So clearly he's not happy with something. Now, Ange had, a few minutes to make the decision. It took Taylor to go down, and those few minutes, he's made the wrong decision, obviously, but that's fine in retrospect. I don't see how you could possibly have known that Juranovic was going to be that bad. You might have thought that Juranovic at 80% is maybe equivalent to Burnaby at 100%. Maybe that's what he was thinking. But I don't know how you could have known really that Juranovic was going to be that bad. It's difficult to believe. If he was that bad in training, he probably wouldn't even have been on the bench. But obviously, in retrospect, it was a game-changing decision, and it did not go in our favour.
But the thing is, Juranovic was given time off after the World Cup. He was given a week rest after the World Cup, and hadn't played since then. During that time, Burnaby's been training. He's been with the first team. Been working on the game plan. It was a strange decision for me. You pay £3 million plus for a left back, but then decide to play an actual right back who hasn't been at the club for the last 5 or 6 weeks and place him the biggest game of the season so far. You just wonder what's going through Burnaby's head thinking about that.
The Burnaby is in a very difficult position now, because that's for him on a personal level, that's a shocker. But I mean, if you look at, JJ was skinned all day by Sakala, but Burnaby is fast as you like. And JJ made Sakala look like an absolute genius. But Bernabei, the one thing he does have going for him is pace. Now, you wouldn't be relying on him if there's balls getting battered into the box all day, but I mean, if you're talking about pace up and down the wing, if you're talking about stopping someone on a counter attack, I mean, yes, he's looked a bit erratic, but that is a hell of an indictment. That guy has gone on, that JJ has been going on in front of you, and then he's played like that, and then I think Bernabei finds himself in a position now where he really needs to, think about his future, because he's clearly does not have the manager's trust at all. And I don't know if it's because of incidents off the pitch where things have happened that do not line up with Ange's values, but something's happened, because that's a hell of a decision.
It is. There's a few points there, John, I think really interesting. The fact that, Juranovic wasn't fit enough to play right back. Otherwise, you wouldn't have thrown in Johnson for his debut at Ibrox. Absolutely spot on, if you ask me. I think when I was looking at the starting 11, because the other thing that brought a lot of comments and a lot of discussion was James Forrest starting the game. I looked at really, really, basically, Paddy, and I just basically said, Maeda and Forrest are better defenders than Abada and Jota, and that's what we need with Barisic and Tavernier coming down the wings, etc. And I just looked at it like that. But then when you look at the change, is Ange confident enough in Bernabei's defensive qualities? Is that really to have played let's say an 80% fit Juranovic in front of Bernabei? Is he maybe doubting the defensive qualities in a game like that? And then I'm going to ask you the question: double header against Kilmarnock starting this weekend. Who starts at left back, Paddy?
That's a good one. Go back to your first point where if Ange doubts his defensive qualities in a game against Rangers, well, you don't spend £3 million on him then. You don't buy him. Simple as that. So then you've got to question the recruitment process there, if that's the case, because that's what these players are getting brought in for. It's to play against Rangers, to play in the Champions League or Europe. So I've no idea whether Ange thinks his defensive duties are good enough or not. Clearly he doesn't, he, after watching what we witnessed when he put Juranovic on. And he's got to start against Kilmarnock. He's got to. Because, again, going back to what John was saying, what does that say to Bernabei if either Juranovic or Johnson's picked ahead of him for this game? So I would say play him. I would say play him at Kilmarnock, because we've got to see what the guy's got to offer. And then we can make a decision there. I know I wouldn't go quite as far and say he needs to think about his future just yet, because he's just here. But if he's not chosen to play against Kilmarnock this weekend, then I don't think it looks good for him.
I would agree with that, John. What's your take first and foremost? Do you think Ange will start with Juranovic just to say, listen, get the cobwebs away, blow the cobwebs away, get back to the player that we know you can be, and also keep him in a short window, of course? Or do you give Bernabei a bit more of an opportunity to resurrect his time at Celtic, because people are questioning if he's got a future already?
Yeah, that's not a decision. I mean, Juranovic was an absolute disaster, and for whatever reason, you cannot play him again there. Now, I suppose from Ange's point of view, what he's looking at is obviously all the things we said before, his qualities. There isn't a solid offer in the door yet, so as far as he's concerned, Juranovic is still an important member of his team and his squad. But you've got to think that in the background, Juranovic's agent is in his ear constantly saying about this club, that club, the next club. And, he certainly looked psychologically as if he was out the door, because he wasn't at the game. Wherever he was, it wasn't at that game, So it has to be Bernabei, or, if it's not, Greg Taylor's less injured leg, put that one. But it can't be... It can't be JJ. I think he's basically done now. I mean, seriously, he has to be, given what happened there. I think he's got to be away this window. He thinks he is anyway, is the impression I got from that, because he was not prepared to go on that pitch. He just wasn't at the races at all. Psychologically, he hadn't done himself. So he obviously maybe thought he was going to be sitting on the bench, which was fine. He certainly didn't think he was going to be playing the wrong side of the pitch for that length of time. He just wasn't prepared. And he was so far off it, miles and miles off it. He was 10, 15 yards off his man at points. And it was an absolute shambles. So it cannot be him. It has to be Bernabei, regardless of what you think. And quite frankly, if Bernabei can't show up in this sort of double header that we have coming up, then his future is definitely in doubt. But when I said he's got to consider his future, I was more thinking that he's got to consider, can he improve? Can he get into this team? Can he become first choice? What does he have to do to get there? Can he change any behaviours the manager's not happy with? I think you really, really need some self-reflection. And one of the things you don't need to be doing is liking certain tweets, which he did, and I don't know if probably a load of people aren't aware of that, but he liked a tweet which was fairly critical of the decision not to play him. So that's the kind of thing, like Big Giacomakis as well. Once you start down that road, you're making that's a bed of nails you're leaving yourself to lie on there, because that's not going to go well. So he needs to be very, very careful. And we know, who was it? There's a very famous place. Was it Ronaldo or something like that? Said when he partied with these boys over the water, it was Bernabei and another fella just said they were madmen. He'd never seen anything like it. And you're thinking he's coming to Glasgow. The first thing he's got, and then he's
another F on Juarez, isn't it?
And then he gets caught drink driving straight off the bat, and then that's indicative. That kind of behaviour is not indicative of a properly focused professional athlete. That's the bottom line. That's old school stuff, and it's also the kind of thing I imagine Ange hates. You have to think that factors into Ange's thinking about, because if you can't trust him off the pitch, how can you trust him on the pitch?
No, you're right.
That's the bottom line.
Yeah.
For sure. Gary Oliver, let's talk a wee bit more about Greg before we move on. Greg Taylor coming off changed the game. I think in many ways it also shows the importance of Greg Taylor and how important he has become as a fixture in this Ange team. Now, it's all been made a joke of course it has, in regards to Morelos going over, shut your hole, fat boy. And you don't have to be a lip reader to you don't have to be a lip reader to figure out what Greg was saying. My point would be this: it's kind of taking the heat off of Morelos a bit. Morelos wasn't over there to make sure Greg Taylor was okay. He wasn't doing the Kyogo bit, right?
No.
Why is he anywhere near Greg Taylor, and why is he not being dealt with?
He should have been chased.
I'll come to you on that.
He should have been chased, and it was a concerted effort to keep going, wasn't it? It wasn't a quick get up, let's get on with the game. He was constantly in Taylor's face. And again, it's just indicative of unprofessionalism of that striker and that side of the city. Listen, Morelos is irrelevance to me. He's of no relevance to anything. I think Taylor was cracking. Put him down, one liner, that was it. Back in your box you go, son.
But wasn't there an issue then? Was it Morelos was getting offered just after that incident where they just wouldn't leave Taylor alone?
No.
And that started a wee bit of stramash with Callum McGregor and
Barisic,
because he just wouldn't leave him alone. When you're saying he wasn't dealt with, the referee was over there listening to what he was saying, and he was clearly berating a man. So he's berating the man that's on the floor. He did it twice. He did it the first time he went down, did it the second time he went down just before he was taken off. And he's just over there shouting abuse at him. Now, the referee's got to have a handle on that.
This is the same referee who failed to send Morelos off for grappling Ryan Christie's privates, kicking Tony Ralston whilst he was on the deck. It's the same ref, isn't it? It was beating that referee that game. Morelos cannot be sent off whilst beating his referee in a game, it would seem. I'm going to bring this up as well because, again, this is with the benefit of watching the game twice, I guess. JP comes in. Juranovic instead of Bernabei in his natural position was a poor call, as was the James Forrest selection. And again, I watched Forrest with interest today, Paddy, right? He's done nothing that would stand out in your mind as a game-changing moment. Absolutely get that. But I was watching how he was working with Johnson at right back. I was looking at a lot of the defensive blocks he was making. He was transitioning defence into attack.
Yeah.
It wasn't, no way was he the best player on the park. But again, I think I can understand why. I really can understand why Ange started with James Forrest, Paddy.
No,
What was
I
your
agree
take
with
on his
that.
performance?
I thought he did all right. I didn't think there was much wrong with his performance at all. He's obviously not the James Forrest who we know, that all out attacker. Now he's got a different role to play under Ange, and I think the role he was asked to play, he carried out well at Ibrox. When the team line was first announced, I was expecting Jota to get dropped. I alluded to that during the week, that I thought Jota was get dropped, and I put my team selection up for Maida, because this is a game for Maida. Let's say at the start, we nullify their wing threat. We take out half of their I suppose their team, and they did that to a certain extent. James Forrest in that one just gets criticised, doesn't he? He seems to be one that just seems to be, he gets criticism for criticism's sake. Thought he did his job well. I thought Maida was superb. In that first half, he had the making of Tavernier every single time he went down that left flank. He gave that guy nightmares. I thought he'd done a decent job. He was put in there. It was the only thing I would say is that I thought Abada may have started, because Abada's got form, doesn't he? He's got form against Rangers, and he likes to score a goal against them, and he terrorises Barisic as well. But considering we were at Ibrox, I thought the right call. Ange got that one right.
What's your take, John?
I was surprised not to see Abada. I don't think anyone, if you'd asked them before the game, genuinely had James Forrest in their team. I was surprised not to see Abada, because as far as I'm aware, Abada still lives in Barisic's house because they can't see him. When it came to James Forrest, though, immediately then after you thought, okay, Abada's not starting, so what's the reasoning here? And the reasoning obviously was, defensive solidity. And you're thinking down that side, Johnson's making his debut. Is that why Forrest was picked? So Forrest has all the experience. He's not going to be overawed at Ibrox. And he provides far more defensive cover than either Jota or Abada, which he did. And I watched his game again with interest this morning. And the issue, the only two issues you have, he contributed, but some of his passing, but this applies for the whole team. He did something good, did something really bad. It was like, took up a great position, won a great ball, gave a terrible pass. And that was sort of why not because of James Forrest, because everyone was doing that. Everyone was, winning a good ball, making a terrible pass, making a great pass, choosing the wrong option. It was, there was a lot of that sort of inconsistency. So it was difficult to get a handle on exactly why we were playing poorly, but it certainly wasn't because of anything to do with James. Now, the other thing, the problem you have in that game is Abada gives you that dynamism. Abada gives you that absolute, definitely going to the line, terrorising Barisic, drifting in behind him. And there was one, I think it was even pointed out, wasn't it, in the commentary, where James Forrest isn't expecting the ball to come through, and that's exactly the kind of ball, exactly the kind of ball Abada lives on, standing behind Barisic, waiting for him to duff it, which he did. So. But James, the only other issue I have with him at the moment is he's come now to doing something rather than getting to the byline. What he's doing is he makes a run parallel to the 18-yard line, and he's playing balls off, trying to get the 1-2s and all the rest of it. But it's incredibly predictable, because he's not really hitting the line. But a couple of times there, and I counted them, and in terms of like clear. Great balls into the box, which people should have gotten the end of. There was at least two, if not three. He played some cracking balls in, So I would say it was a surprise, but ultimately, how big a difference would Abada have made? Is the question. And you can't. I'm not going to second guess the manager on that one, because that's just purely, for the starting lineup, he has that right. I would say. He made the wrong call with JJ in retrospect, but in this, I don't know, because I don't know how much difference Abada makes. because in terms of when he came on, what difference did Abada make? Was he much better than JJ? Certainly the subs made an important contribution, but look, for that goal, he wasn't in that movement. So it's a difficult one for Ange, obviously. He thinks I can understand the logic, put it that way. I can understand the logic, and James didn't let himself down. I thought he contributed as much as anyone else.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. 5 minutes to go. Thanks the 900 plus strong who are watching the broadcast today. We really appreciate your support. If you haven't done so already, give us a wee like on YouTube and subscribe to the channel for daily Celtic content throughout 2023 and beyond. Enda McGurk, great to hear the Celtic board have some testicular fortitude, as John says. Yes, it is. And we are talking, of course, about they are demanding answers from the SFA in relation to the implementation and the handling of VAR, because it's leaving us all scratching our heads. Jungle Line points out, regardless of all the chat today and yesterday, they had to win it and they didn't, and Celtic come away unscathed from Ibrox indeed. Now, you're talking about substitutes. This is another one leading up to the substitution of Giakoumakis coming on, Paddy. It's 75 minutes, so if I'm going to give Ange a hard time for maybe some of the selection issues or whatever, got to give the big man credit, because I'm looking at Giakoumakis and I think 99% of his substitute appearances have resulted in him replacing Kyogo. No, we'll keep Kyogo in the park, and who gets the winner? The wee man. Yep. So were you surprised when Kyogo stayed on and Atati came off at that point?
Yep, 100%. How often do we see the two of them on the park at the same time? And it was a masterstroke, if it was anything. So no, you're right. For all we got the Juranovic substitution wrong, I pulled it out of the bag, having Giakoumakis on, because he did have a hand in the goal, as did Jota's little, was it a back heel into the 18-yard box that Jota had played? It was a bit of cheeky skill anyway, to put through Moy. But nah, I like to see that. That kind of shook it up a wee bit, and I don't think they knew how to deal with that. Because anybody, I defy any Celtic fan to say they would have expected Kyogo and Giakoumakis to be on the park with 15 minutes to go, and ultimately it got us out of jail, because at that point I couldn't see where a goal was coming from, and I kept saying it for 60 minutes almost. We just didn't seem to get in our groove. We just couldn't seem to get anything in that final third. But no, it was a stroke of genius for the gaffer, so we'll give him that one.
A 4-2-4. A 4-2-4 at Ibrox. So how often have you seen a 4-2-4 at Ibrox?
It was Brendan Rodgers-esque.
And of the substitutes that did come on, and the one man who should have gone off, who he didn't take off. So that move, which was a beautiful move, Jota cuts in, plays a slide rule pass to Moy, who, as we all know, I think is the greatest player who ever pulled on a shirt. Moy manages to get it past to Big Gigi. Gigi swivels on it, gets it across, and Kyogo's standing there waiting, and it's a beautiful, calm, deliberate finish in the middle of that sort of maelstrom of frantic bodies getting thrown round. It's a beautiful finish. It's not just a tap in, he has to put it high, there's guys on the line, and that move, the show actually goes Jota, Moy, and then Jota again, and then Gigi, and then across to Kyogo. So that's 3 subs, and the guy that you almost certainly would have subbed in any other game, right? So that's all the manager. So forever, whatever you can say, you can certainly forgive him for the JJ issues, because he couldn't have expected that. But that was a brilliant and brave, very brave 4-2-4. That's very, very brave stuff. So fair play to him, a great decision, and it got us the draw, a draw which, for all intents and purposes, destroys their morale, because they, as one of the commenters pointed out there, we didn't have to win that game; they had to win that game.
No, for sure. And at that point where you get the injury time coming up on the board, Paddy, you're looking at that going, right, I fancy us for the win. That's, the momentum shift was huge at that point. And we've not really even mentioned Moy, because Moy probably didn't deserve to get dropped for this game. I mean, he'd been brilliant leading into it. But I've said before, I think he strikes me as being a low maintenance type player, Paddy, who will just get on with it. He came on, he done his bit, he was involved in the goal. I'm just very quickly going to ask you guys your thoughts about selections. We've spoken about the left-back position in particular. How else do you think he's going to mix it up for the game against Kilmarnock this Saturday?
I think Moy starts. I was watching O'Reilly carefully again on the second look, and he was industrious. He tried hard, but he's just, the passes aren't there. The thing is with Moy, his passing is sensational when you give him any sort of time at all. He gets you out of danger. He puts them in danger. If you give him time, he's fantastic. So I think O'Reilly's getting dropped for this one. I say Bernabei at left. I think Johnson keeps his position. And up front, I don't know. Kilmarnock, so pair many. Is Jota done enough to get back in? I think maybe Jota, that was a wee wake-up call. He certainly was trying very hard when he came on.
Yeah.
So, I don't know if it's... the thing is, trying very hard. I mean, that you're sort of... what you're saying there is it was his attitude rather than his actual playing. It wasn't. I don't think it was in the mark with his attitude. He just wasn't playing very well. So I don't know if he comes back in automatically. Maeda's definitely starting. I think that's a given. Kyogo's definitely starting. So I think it's really who's starting on the right, or who's taking that one other place.
Yeah, for sure. What do you make of that then, Paddy? Would you maybe rest O'Reilly and perhaps obviously bring in Jota for the right hand side?
I would definitely rest O'Reilly. I agree with John. He tried, didn't he? And nothing just seemed to come off for him. Whereas when Moy came on, I think he came on 60th minute or something, just dead calm, dead assured. And it was unfortunate to get dropped because he was lightning against Hibs as well. So I think if anybody gets dropped, it'll be O'Reilly. And Jota come back. I don't know. I mean, would I put him in? I wouldn't put James Forrest back on anyway because we're going to be attacking more in this game, aren't we? We're going to be looking to get goals. I would like to see Abada back in there. I just like Abada. For no other reason than the fact that I like him, he's quick, he's direct, he likes to run at defenders. I'd like to see him in there too, because we're going to be faced with another 5-5-0, aren't we? When we face Kilmarnock. So we'll need to unlock that two-tier defence. That was a long, convoluted answer just to say I would start Moy and start Abada. that was pretty much it for me.
Superb. We'll be chatting about it tomorrow and on Friday. Loads of talking points. Thanks, everybody, for getting involved in the comment section. And we do try and get as many of you involved as we possibly can. If you haven't done so already, get subscribing on the YouTube. As I say, we are broadcasting every single day. And Paddy, tell us a wee bit about where we can find your writing. Where's your blog?
Yeah, you can find it on, just Google Vital Celtic, and you'll see my blog there. I'm on pretty much every day, just posting away, looking for Celtic content for the readers to enjoy, hopefully. So yeah, just Google Vital Celtic and you'll see it there.
You'll be able to check out the blog online and also on the socials as well. Follow on Vital Celtic. Thanks everybody for getting involved. I really enjoyed that, and hopefully we'll see Kevin Graham back next week, unless he's taken a fortnight away. And thank you to Paddy and John for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.